Hello everyone, and 15 minutes late, or actually half an hour late, we're finally here. There we go. Now, I may or may have not forgotten that the Hungarian Grand Prix was this weekend. But we're finally here, so it's better late than never. Norris currently topping the times of Leclerc in P2 and Piastri in P3. That is a 17.631 for Lando Norris, who's also on track once more. Charles Leclerc looking quick. We got Behrman P4, Verstappen, Albon, Hamilton, Lawson, Sainz, Hadjar, Russell, Ocon, Antonelli, Colapinto, Paul Aaron in P15 for Sauber. Then we got Sonoda, Bortoletto, Dragovic in P18, Gasly and Stroll. So, Paul Aaron in place of Nico Hülkenberg, the podium sitter in Great Britain. That's P15 for Aaron. It's, however, Dragovic, 18th position in place of Alonso, but that might not just be for FP1. Fernando Alonso has got a bit of an issue with a muscle injury, so it could be that we see the Spaniard out of this entire weekend. They're going to see how they go. I don't know if they're going to see how they go in FP2, or if they're going to make a decision before FP2 as to whether Alonso does drive the car. I'm not entirely sure what the regulation is. If the driver competes in FP2, they have to do the race weekend. I'm not entirely sure. I don't think that's the case, because I thought Oliver Behrman did even more last-minute stand-in for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. But yeah, it will be an interesting one, and we could see potentially Felipe Drugovic's first F1 entry, which would be absolutely incredible to see after such a long period that we have missed this so far. I'm actually going to have a look at Saudi Arabia last year, and the FP2 result was with Carlos Sainz. The FP3 result was with Oliver Behrman. So you could do FP2 and still end up not being in the weekend. So Fernando Alonso, definitely not certain as to whether they will be competing this weekend, but for sure they will have two drivers regardless, and it's just a matter of time until we find out how things are going to go. It should be pretty fun for either driver, although Fernando Alonso not really happy with the performance back in Belgium as they qualified P19, finished P17. They still made progress, but it's at the back of the pack for a team that really shouldn't be there, as you kind of expect Aston Martin these days to be scoring points, but they just haven't really been doing it. I want to have a look at the standing situation, if I can, because yeah, Aston Martin P8, which I just wouldn't think over the last few seasons. 2023, absolutely phenomenal season for them. They did drop off, as everybody expected, because they had less facilities compared to the teams around them, and it meant that they did go to P5 in the end. But still, P5 now down to P8 is a massive, massive change. We saw Williams down in P7, 8 and 9 just a couple of years ago, and now they're P5. So a big switch up between the two British teams, and yeah, pretty frustrating for everybody at Aston Martin. Talking about Williams though, they had a brilliant race with Alex Albon in Belgium, but Carlos Sainz finding the circuit a little bit tricky in that car, and yeah, just not enjoying it. I have to say, from my memory, I may have got this wrong, but from my memory, Carlos Sainz hasn't had the best performances in the wet conditions. So, it was wet to begin with. Was it wet the entire way through? I'm pretty sure. So, no, they went on to the slicks later on in the race. So, it was a little bit difficult. Now, I'm just going to quickly check something, and I will be back. Alrighty, if you've just joined, I hope you're enjoying your weekend so far as it's starting. Final day of the weekday, really, but an early weekend if you like to consider it that. We're just a fair few minutes into the FP1 session for the Hungarian Grand Prix, and it is 41 minutes left on the clock of the hour session, with Lando Norris, Albon and Piastri being the top three. Leclerc is going quickly on the medium tyre though, as they come into the final two corners. They do have a bit of traffic ahead. I believe that's one of the either Alpines or Racing Bulls. I can't quite see it as well as you guys can. And that is, of course, Charles Leclerc going across the line. I'm just going to double check one more thing as well before we fully continue with the live stream, and then we'll be good to go. That should absolutely fine. And there are no worries. Perfect. Last year, the Hungarian Grand Prix was a little bit controversial with a few drivers. Of course, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen having their coming together. I think in the end, allowing Hamilton to be P3 in that race with Mercedes. But it was all about McLaren, who had a very interesting team orders moment, where Lando Norris had to give up the position for race victory to Oscar Piastri. They, of course, did work out later on in the season, so it was evenly spread for the team, but it was still a little bit controversial. Oscar Piastri took their first ever Grand Prix victory in a little bit of a controversial fashion, which is not the way you want to do it, but they did go and take a few more wins later on down the line, which they thoroughly enjoyed. And now they are leading the World Championship. They extended their gap last weekend in Spa, and I do have to say it's looking ever so impossible for Lando Norris with the momentum that Oscar Piastri has. Of course, they are only 16 points away from each other. There was a big sway from the kind of Silverstone penalty, but other than that, it's definitely pro Oscar Piastri. It ideally for Piastri would have been a little bit bigger, but great for Norris to be able to fight very closely with their teammate and keep this battle pretty entertaining up front, despite McLaren breaking away and looking to secure the Constructors or Teams Championship already. 516 points compared to Ferrari's 248. 220 for Mercedes, so those guys are having a hell of a battle. Take us back to the 2017, 18, 19 days. But yeah, it's really McLaren's championship. It's just now between the two drivers. Red Bull Racing 192 points, not that far away from the Mercedes, but it is Max Verstappen who's scoring pretty much all those points. That being said, Yuki Tsunoda did have a brilliant performance in qualifying. Well, I say brilliant performance, more what you should expect performance in qualifying. They were a bit unlucky with the race and the strategy, I believe, so that's why they didn't score any points. But if they're finding some momentum with that car, there was an upgrade, I think, in Belgium for them, and they were able to work out on it quite nicely, and they showed some pretty good confidence. So I think Yuki Tsunoda can definitely look to turn things around. Right. I hope we're back. That was very frustrating. I do apologise for the delay in that one. But we are all good to go now. That should be problem no more. As I was saying, talking about Red Bull, Max Verstappen was in doubt of where they would spend 2026. Rumours of them going to Mercedes and replacing George Russell. Later on down the line, if they gave it a little bit more time this season, then maybe it wouldn't have been George Russell that would have been replaced, as Antonelli is struggling with confidence in recent races. But yeah, realistically, and also pretty much confirmed last weekend, Toto Wolff said they'll be continuing with the 2 drivers that they have, and Max Verstappen confirmed that they will be continuing with Red Bull in 2026. However, Toto Wolff did say that just because Max Verstappen isn't racing in 2026, they can't try to understand where Max wants to be in 27 and 28. That is the situation that they're in right now. Really, Max Verstappen's going to try and figure out what's going on with the engines, if Mercedes is going to be good, if the Red Bull 4 powertrain will be what they're looking for, then that will change the situation. It will also give Antonelli and George Russell plenty of time to battle out as teammates and confirm who is the driver that should carry on with the team if Verstappen is to join. That's an if. And I think Verstappen really does want to continue with Red Bull for their entire career. I think that's a fair statement. They also want to win. So whatever's best for the Verstappen team, then they will do that. But I think in every scenario possible, they're going to try and stay with the Milton Keynes squad. Now we've talked about that a fair bit. We'll go back to the timings. We've only got a couple of cars out on track right now. We've got Lando Norris, who's taken that top spot once more, improving to a 16.8. The only driver to be in the 16.8, and they're almost 6 tenths ahead of Charles Leclerc, who did go pretty quickly, to be fair, a little bit later or earlier on in the session. Carlos Sainz P3, it's Albon in P4. Piastri, Lawson, Hadjar, Verstappen, Behrman, and Hamilton in P10. We've got Ocon, Tsunoda, Russell, Stroll, Drogovic, Gasly, Colapinto, Bortoleto, Antonelli, and Aaron, the FP1 driver at the back of the pack so far. Antonelli having a fairly short run plan compared to a few other drivers, but pretty much the same as their teammate. So, not quite finding confidence as realistically both drivers in that car. We know that George Russell's had pole position around this circuit before, so they can go very quickly. And I think they scored their first ever Formula 1 point here as well. P9, that famous one. So, yeah, it's not looking ideal for Mercedes right now in a European circuit that shouldn't be massively hot with the weather, but that being said, it is 2025 and temperatures do seem to be hotter than they've ever been before. So maybe that Mercedes isn't able to operate quite so well in this condition. And like we saw in the beginning of the season, well, we saw a few drivers struggle in the wet, so that mixed the whole grid up. But then we also saw a fair few night races to begin the season as well. And maybe that helped the Mercedes to get a decent temperature with that car. And now that's not quite so much the case. That is the Sauber causing the yellow flag. And that will be Aaron in the penultimate corner. They're not moving as far as I can see right now. So could be a red flag if it's anything more. And with just over half of the session to go, we might have an early red flag. Not an early red flag, but a little bit of a delay in the session. Of course, the clock doesn't get paused because it is only a practice session compared to qualifying and the race. It is a VSC deployed, so all cars out on track right now have to travel fairly slowly. Still, that car isn't moving. They're going to try and not red flag the session. That will allow the drivers that are out on track right now to continue to try and warm up their tyres as long as they follow a delta, so they don't have to do it all again a little bit later. But Aaron is still stuck out on track right now. Already half an hour on the clock now, and it is all cleared. We're good to go. Not entirely sure what happened with Aaron. But I think they're alright, especially since it was just a VSC. I'm going to try and understand what the situation is if I can. But right now, I have no idea. I do know that we don't have basically anyone out on track except from a few. So give me a moment. Alrighty, so it is Paul Aaron who has gone into the gravel trap. That was about it, and no damage, I don't believe, so pulled off the circuit. That's why the VSC was brought out instead. And we got a swift start, or restart, onto the session again. We got a fair few cars now out on track, getting a little bit busier. We've just seen, I believe that was Carlos Sainz improve up to P3. That's good news for the Spaniard. Now we've seen a fair mix of mediums and hards so far, so now we're going to get some fresh soft tyre running from a few drivers. I think we've already had that from Colapinto, as they're up to P6. A few other drivers not quite having the same situation. Just an update, it's Paul Aaron who's gone out into the gravel trap, and other than that, all 19 cars are good to go. Aaron was in place of Hulkenberg, and Drogovic is currently in place of Alonso and might continue to be in place of Alonso for the entire weekend, if not Saturday and onwards effectively. So Drogovic has got to really treat this one like a race weekend, which I don't know when the last time they actually raced the car was, but they're really going to have to try and dig deep here, because this could be their only chance to really prove what they've got. Formula 1, the F2 champion, I think in 2022, 25 years old, and of course that championship was a fair few years ago now. Doesn't make it any easier. They are actually currently, I think, in or entering for Le Mans, and they are competing in the IMSA Sports Car Championship, so they are still driving, but just not much. They've done 2 races in Formula E for the 24-25 championship, but their last season in F2 was in 2022, and that was a P1. So I believe they do have enough super license points. That's why they've continued to drive in some other sessions. Previously doing Formula 2 a couple of times. So they gained, I don't know if they gained a few super license points for that, but I'm really surprised that they've managed to hold on to their super license whilst being out of a decent amount of racing, really, for such a long time. But this is their opportunity to give something a go, if they're given the chance. Fernando Alonso, of course, wants every chance at racing in that seat for the weekend. But if that's not safe or in best interest for the rest of their season, then they won't do it. That was a momentary yellow flag just for a second. Update to the timings. We've seen Charles Leclerc go fastest, as a lot of cars do their soft tyre runs. It's Norris with a 28.0 in the first sector. Bortoleto was 2 tenths behind there in the first sector. They are effectively 8 tenths behind in the overall lap. So a few teams are really finding a lot of pace. That's Russell showing what the car can do now. Still behind the Williams, but they have definitely jumped up a long way. That is Lando Norris destroying Charles Leclerc's lap time there. Almost 8 tenths ahead, 7 tenths for sure. Paul Aaron into the gravel, that was just a few moments ago, about 10 minutes ago now. Paul Aaron went into the gravel and no damage, no crash, just didn't manage to make it out and got dragged into the pit lane. Sorry, dragged off the circuit. So it was just a momentary VSC. It wasn't actually a red flag that was pulled out, which was good. And just update you as well, Zingy. Fernando Alonso currently being replaced by Drugovich this weekend. Potentially for the entire weekend. Not only this FP1 session, because of a muscle injury for Alonso. Whether that will be the case or not, we don't know, but for now, it's a possibility. I think Alonso's going to try and enter FP2 and see how things go. Stroll to P3, a brilliant lap there for Lance Stroll. Still 9 tenths away from Lando Norris, though. Oscar Piastri hasn't managed to set a lap time that's anywhere near close to their teammate. And I want to have a look at the sector times, because that lap that they just did there was not representative at all. So they're probably going again right here. We're looking for a 28.0 really from Oscar Piastri. We go and see a 27.9 instead. So faster in the first sector than their teammate by a little bit. What can Piastri do in that middle sector? Carlos Sainz up to P8. Really looking to try and find some good momentum here this weekend after a pretty terrible one before. Colapinto's soft tyre run earlier on has been improved upon. They go to P13. More where we expect the Alpine to be. Colapinto's struggling with the Alpine a little bit. But of course they are a direct competitor with their teammate in the equal machinery, so they've got a lot to show. Having a brilliant performance in the Williams, just not gelling with the Alpine so well. Maybe it seems to be a bit of a difficult car for their driving style. Piastri to P2, so not finding the pace in the middle and final sector, a 10.5 away from their teammate. It is Carlos Sainz 6 tenths away instead from the second McLaren, but still, that's a brilliant lap from Lance Stroll. Close, of course, is Albon and Russell, but looking at the performances that we've seen recently, You really don't expect that Aston Martin to be there. So Charles Leclerc going pretty rapid in that first sector. So what can we see from the middle and the final? A 26.8 and a 21.4 for Piastri. 0.9 in the middle sector. It was a 0.4 for Piastri in the final. Been improved upon as the first sector by Alex Albon, so all the cars going quicker now. Really bringing the pace up. So far that middle sector was not beaten. The McLaren still have it. Decent in the final sector though, and they get pretty close to Piastri. A terrible middle sector for Albon as they back off on the lap. Don't know if they got some traffic there or not. But with 20 minutes on the clock, we are seeing some improvements as a lot of cars are out on the soft tyres. Colapinto recently gone in. Gasly recently improved up to P17 just behind their teammate. Hamilton, as we speak, to P4. And then, other than that, we don't see too much. Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon in a bit of a world of a difference. Hadjar and Lawson now show that they've got a similar situation as well. That being said, I think Lawson beat his teammate last weekend. So there was a bit of a battle that they had on track for a short period. I have to be honest, after lap 22, I missed most of the race. So I wouldn't be able to definitely confirm what happened with their race later on. I'm having a look at the results now though. It was Liam Lawson P8 and it was Isaac Hadjar who did have a terrible race in the end. I think they got messed up with strategy maybe, if I remember correctly, down to P20. So Liam Lawson made a nice little chunk to their teammate in the end. Looking at the Drivers' Championship with the two, it is Hadjar P11 with 22 points and Liam Lawson in P14 with 16 points. Doesn't seem that big of a difference when you think about championship points competing for a championship, but that is a huge difference when you think about the lower teams that look to score the lower points when they do score points. So, yeah, it's a decent chunk that Hadjar has right now. Of course, one lucky race can change the whole situation completely. Looking at the rest, it's Oscar Piastri, as we said, about 16 points ahead of their teammate. Max Verstappen not too far, well, a bit far away. George Russell and Verstappen, they're fairly close. One mistake from Verstappen and Russell will be on his heels. It's Charles Leclerc in P5. They're not too far away from George Russell, but a little bit far away from Verstappen. Again, anything can change. Then Hamilton just into the 100-point range, clearly ahead of Antonelli. And then it is Albon who's trying to make sure that they finish ahead of Antonelli, who's in their rookie season. Then Hülkenberg with a brilliant performance in the last couple of races. Of course, they've gone to 37 points into P9 in a very short span of races, which is brilliant. Last race, of course, in Belgium, though, they didn't score any points, whereas their teammate Gabriel Bortoleto did, which was a brilliant, brilliant effort from them. Looking further down the stands, we've got Esteban Ocon, who's had some pretty decent point scoring moments in a few occasions. Gasly has had the late surge for points in recent races as well. And it's Lance Stroll just behind him. Gasly with 1 point actually in Belgium. Then Lance Stroll, then Liam Lawson, then Fernando Alonso, who also had a bit more of a recent point spree. As they really struggled with the beginning of the season. That's maybe why they're so far back. Then Carlos Sainz having a few points positions here and there. 16 points equal with both Lawson and Alonso. And then we see Oliver Behrman, who's had some qualifying troubles, which makes them really work hard in the race. And really work harder than they should be. And then we've got Bortoleto in P19 and Colapinto with 0 points, along with Jack Doohan in P21. Bortoleto, I think, has been overlooked a little bit. I think, this season so far. Of course, they just scored points in the last weekend. They are now 2 points away from Oliver Behrman. 2 rookies right there. But we've also got, just ahead of them, Yuki Tsunoda, Carlos Sainz, Fernando Alonso. Those guys are coming up to be veterans, if not already veterans. So they aren't too far away from the likes of Yuki Tsunoda. And again, a lucky result could put them ahead even further. But Bortoleto, slowly but surely making good progress, steady progress. Not like they're taking back steps, really. And driving maturely as well. So Bortoleto is still showing some good promise, despite not quite showing it on the standings sheets when pen comes to paper. Or paper, yeah, pen comes to paper. So, yeah, an interesting one. Antonelli to P7, improving just ahead of Russell. It's a good effort from the young Italian. Now we've got less than a quarter of an hour on the clock. Tsunoda having a little bit of a tough one. 17th for them, not quite so close to their teammate. And that's what you're really looking for in practice. You're looking for running, as much running as possible. A little bit of pace. Not really so much in FP1, but a little bit of pace. And ideally, the 2 teammates close to each other. That's where you find out where the cars really are. Of course, in qualifying, it's all situational. But looking throughout the period of the weekend, throughout the 3 practice sessions that you get, if you see the 2 teammates close together, that's where that car kind of really is. Unless they make changes, of course, because some drivers or some teams do favour a race setup over a qualifying setup. That being said, Hungary, historically, pretty difficult to overtake at, so these drivers will be looking at a bit more of a qualifying setup around here. And that sometimes, not all the time, sometimes entails a high downforce setup, because you get that lap time. You don't need the straight line speed to overtake cars. So if you do get ahead by getting a brilliant qualifying, then that'll be the benefit. Regardless of whether you want to do that with a setup or not, Hungary, lots of corners, high downforce is necessary anyway, so the teams will be doing that regardless. 12 minutes on the clock and we see a 16.052 be the fastest time. We have the now top 11 drivers in the 16-second margin. Albon's gone in and come back out on a scrub set of hard tyres. You see a scrub set of mediums for Leclerc, and we see Hajar improved to P4 on the softs recently. Now the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend this time last year, FP1, the fastest time was an 18.7. So a massive improvement from that one. FP2 we saw 17.7, and then FP3 we saw a 16.098. So we've even beaten the FP3 time. High downforce, more lap time to gain from the aerodynamic performance developments that you'll get, kind of a little bit more expected, and the walls aren't necessarily that close, so you don't have to worry too much about things like walls at Monaco. Qualifying, we saw a 15.2 from Lando Norris in the end, and I believe that was the fastest lap time of all. Q1 saw 17.755 or 17.504 from Piastri. It was a 17.087 from Max Verstappen though in that Q1 session. So equal with Lewis Hamilton. So they were both right up there. Daniel Ricciardo was actually very quick as well. So the McLarens weren't actually that quick in the Q1 session of that weekend. So currently, the next session that we have to try and beat lap time-wise, with the times that we've got, is Q2. And that's pretty good going for what we've seen so far this season. So far, usually you kind of beat the Q2 or Q3 lap times. Or sorry, no, practice 1 or practice 2 lap times in the practice 1 session. More likely the practice 2 times are the only ones that are beaten. But now we've skipped FP2, we've skipped FP3, and we've gone straight to Q2, not even Q1. So performance-wise, that is a brilliant performance. Mid-season, the upgrades will have come in even more so compared to the beginning of the season. Of course, it's a little bit relative, so you have to take that into consideration. But that's generally how it looks. Now, I just want to say thank you very much for watching. Of course, we started these watch-alongs this time last year, pretty much, and it's been a pretty good journey. I've enjoyed it a lot. This will be the final live stream for a little bit. It's going to definitely be probably the final live stream for a while for FP1 and FP2. It might not be... It's going to be a little bit difficult to say what's going to be possible and what's not going to be possible. For the most part, the Italian Grand Prix, that is going to be probably live streamed for the Saturday session. But the Friday session will be missed. The Dutch Grand Prix, not really sure if it's going to be possible to do the Saturday, so it's going to be pretty much missing out the entirety of the Dutch Grand Prix, and then we'll be back for the Italian Grand Prix. Of course, we've got the summer break coming up here after Hungary this weekend, so Formula 1 will be gone. We'll still be here doing some live streams with the F1 game, etc. We've got a race this evening and tomorrow, so don't miss that one. That's at the lovely Dutch Grand Prix itself. That's just a little bit of a lowdown before this session ends. 7 minutes on the clock. It's Lando Norris topping the times with the last lap of an 8-minute 30-second, but a best lap of a 1-minute 16. Was it really 8 minutes their last lap? That's absolutely unreal. I don't believe that's true. I think that's a timing issue. There's no way that their last lap time was 8 minutes. Charles Leclerc having some good promise so far. Hamilton fairly close to his teammate position-wise, but performance-wise not so easy. 7-time champion. Struggling with getting used to that Ferrari, as Charles Leclerc's been there since 2019. It's as expected. Behrman in P6, that's pretty good over his teammate. Antonelli close to his teammate. That shows that Antonelli has maybe got some decent confidence around here, as they've been lacking that in recent times, as we said before. Verstappen. Now, it's a difficult one for Verstappen. We always say, you know, it's not looking good for Verstappen in Q1, or sorry, practice 1 and practice 2. It always looks like a problem. And then it comes to Saturday, and Max Verstappen always seems to deliver. Saturday and Sunday, it changes completely. So are we going to look at getting the same situation as we have had so many times? Well, we don't know. I think it went pretty poorly. Was that in Bahrain with Verstappen? But other than that, it's been pretty consistent, and he's had some good performances, good results, of course. Pace-wise, at least, been competitive, except from that race. So, yeah, we'll look to see Verstappen improving, if not in FP2, then FP3 will definitely be their time. 5 minutes on the clock and we're unlikely to see improvements. We just see some more running. Everybody out on track except from Bortoleto and Paul Aaron going into the gravel trap earlier on and having their car be dragged away by the marshals. Other than that, it's a busy old circuit right now. We see the two McLarens not dominating as they were early on in the session, but still a little bit ahead. 2/10 advantage they have. Charles Leclerc absolutely smashing it. Hadjar as well. And then we've got Hamilton, Behrman, Antonelli, Russell, Verstappen, Stroll, Albon, Ocon, Gasly, Lawson, Carlos Sainz, Felipe Drugovich, Yuki Tsunoda, Colapinto, Bortoleto, and Paul Aaron. The gap for the entire field that's currently running right now, 1 minute and 1 second and 6 tenths. And the gaps are pretty competitive, I have to say. Make a mistake and you could be completely out. That's something that Damon Hill mentioned not too long ago. You know, if you make a mistake in qualifying back in the 90s and 80s, you could make a mistake, you could be a second away and you could maybe drop down from P1 to maybe P3, P4, P5. Now, if you drop a couple of tenths, look at where you would go. If you made a slight mistake, everything just completely changes. You make one mistake, you lose half a second, and you go from P1 to P4. But if you were P4 and you made a mistake and lost half a second, then look at where you go. You go all the way down into the bottom of the grid. So absolutely brutal. Brutal as well. Fernando Alonso with that injury. Hopefully we can see them for FP2. Just remember, there is a chance that Felipe Drugovich will be getting their debut this weekend. And that's something that could be very exciting. Hopefully we see Fernando Alonso recover regardless of whether they make it into the next session or not. But that's something that time will show us. And time will show Fernando Alonso whether they will be able to go for running as usual. It's a muscle injury that they have, just to confirm. And they want to try and make sure that it recovers as quickly as possible, as well as possible, so they can get to running as normal. We've done the soft tyre runs. We started with the hards and the mediums. We end with the hards and the mediums. We've had some pretty good running. No rain at all. Temperature, fairly hot. Quite nice. Pretty standard track conditions. The circuit will get rubbered in as we go. The support series will help with that, of course, as well. So the circuit's going to get faster and faster. We've seen a 16.052 from Lando Norris be the fastest time. Absolutely ages ahead of last year's efforts in the weekend so far. So we're looking forward to a very, very quick Hungarian Grand Prix. Is that good for the raceability around this circuit? We'll see. But for competitiveness, looking at the gaps in the grid, it is going to be quite possibly a pretty entertaining race. We've had some good ones in the past. Let's see if we can have another good one. 1 minute on the clock, and we let everyone continue as they have put their scrub tyres on and they're looking to try and get their practice starts. Of course, it's not going to be quite so similar to what they would see on the practice starts. They're going to be looking to try and start on fresh tyres, ready for the race on Sunday, compared to what Drugovich on 19-lap-old hard tyres. They're not going to try and start the race on those. 21-lap-old hard tyres for Hadjar, you know, that would be absolutely brutal. Even that being said, 17-lap-old medium tyres would be really brutal as well. 18, 19 for Piastri. But they're still going to try and get that compounder tyre a little bit of practice in for the practice starts. Unless somebody bins it now and makes it a red flag or a yellow flag and we can't do practice starts, we will get the practice starts that we've been promised. Of course, we'll be back later on for FP2, so don't miss that one. Do join us then. But for now, the FP1 session comes to a close and we watch the cars go across the line. And there is, I think that was a racing ball that just managed to make it across the line. But it is Antonelli, Verstappen and Albon who all go across. And every car will slowly but surely make it through. And as we see a few cars go over the sector lines and see what they're doing, then we will confirm the order. Yeah, we're not going to be getting any improvements. So that is going to be it. It's Lando Norris on top of the times with a 16.052. Piastri, who is just under 200ths of a second away from his teammate. Then Charles Leclerc 2/10 away from Lando Norris. 6/10 away is Isaac Hadjar. Then it's Hamilton, Behrman, Antonelli, Russell, Verstappen, Stroll, Albon, Ocon, Gasly, Lawson, Sainz, Felipe Drugovich and P16. And we've got Tsunoda, Colapinto, Bortoletto and Paul Aaron finishing off the grid with their out earlier on into the gravel, of course. Thank you very much for watching. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you in a few moments' time, a few hours' time for the FP2 session. Don't miss it. It's going to be even more competitive. Will Max Verstappen be able to find some more performance? Will Fernando Alonso join us for the session? And how will Hülkenberg get on with a little bit less time in the session as well compared to Bortoletto? Do join us. We'll see you in a bit. Bye-bye.